You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not just in temperature, but in the way it stripped everything bare: your reputation, your dignity, your truth. I sat there in my navy suit, tie knotted tight at my throat, palms flat on the polished wood of the defense table. Across from me, Kayla, my ex-wife, very pregnant and glowing, like she was starring in her own drama, spoke with all the confidence of someone who believed the lie she'd rehearsed. "Dean left me when I was 5 months pregnant," she said, her voice trembling just enough. "He said he couldn't handle the responsibility, that it wasn't the life he wanted." Bullshit. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I just watched her. Observed the way she gripped the tissue in her hand, how her voice cracked right on cue. I'd taught classes on propaganda and emotional manipulation. Hell, I could write a dissertation on what she was doing up there. But no one else in that courtroom knew the woman I did. "And now," she sniffled, "I'm left to raise this child alone. I don't have the resources he has. He's a tenured professor at a state university. I'm just trying to get by. I need help. We need help." The judge, a thin woman with gray streaks in her hair and eyes that had seen 1,000 lies, scribbled something in her notebook. Kayla's lawyer handed over a folder. I didn't bother to look at it. It wouldn't matter. I glanced to my right. Colin, smug bastard, sitting right next to Kayla, his arm draped along the back of her chair like he was proud of this performance. He wore one of those fitted suits that screamed, "I just discovered high-interest crypto." He didn't even have the decency to look at me, just kept tapping his knee like he was waiting for a round of applause. When the judge turned to me and asked if I had anything to say, I didn't stand right away. I took a breath, let the silence stretch just a little longer than comfortable. Then I rose. "Your Honor," I said, voice steady, "if I may." The judge nodded. "I'd like to submit this envelope as evidence." I pulled it from my briefcase, just a plain manila folder, no frills. But inside it was everything. I walked it over to the bailiff. As he handed it up to the judge, I looked at Kayla, not with rage, not with resentment, just clarity. The judge opened the envelope and began reviewing its contents. First, the DNA test. Dated, certified, irrefutable. Then came the screenshots, text between Kayla and Colin, time-stamped and laced with enough suggestive emojis to make their intentions very clear. And finally, a thumb drive. "Would you like to explain this?" the judge asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Your Honor. The video files on that drive were taken legally, from a public location. They show my ex-wife and her fiancé meeting multiple times over the last 6 months, long before our official separation. The child she's carrying is not mine. I confirmed that before she ever filed for support." Kayla's face drained of color. She looked at Colin. He finally blinked. The judge looked back down at the evidence, jaw tight. "We'll take a recess. 15 minutes. As she stood and walked toward chambers, I returned to my seat. I didn't look at Kayla again. Didn't need to. The courtroom murmured behind us, the quiet beginning of the collapse. I had waited long enough for this moment, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Let her speak. Let her spin her story. And then, let the truth burn it all down. It started with a mistake. A stupid, tiny mistake that cracked everything open. It was close to midnight, and I was grading papers at my desk, half watching some documentary playing in the background, when my phone lit up. "Kayla," it read. I picked it up immediately, instinctively. We were still married then, still sharing a bed. Though it had been cold for a while. I answered, but all I heard were muffled giggles, her voice light and sugary. Then a man's voice, low, intimate. I couldn't make out what he said, but her laugh afterward cut deep. "Kayla," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, more giggling, then silence. She hung up. I stared at the screen for a long time. Maybe it was a butt dial. Maybe she was out with friends, but I knew. Deep down, I already knew. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 in the morning, I got in my car and drove to the hospital where she worked. She was supposed to be pulling an overnight shift, something she had been doing more often lately. Budget cuts, she said, staff shortage, mandatory overtime. I parked a few spots back from the employee entrance and waited. It was freezing, and my breath fogged up the windshield, but I didn't move. Around 5:30, I saw her walk out. She wasn't alone. Colin. I recognized him instantly. He'd gone to the same spin class she used to drag me to before I gave up trying to enjoy it. He was one of those guys who always had a towel slung over his shoulder, who smirked like he knew a secret. I remember him giving Kayla a little too much attention, asking her if she wanted to double up a class with him sometime. That morning, she walked beside him like they'd done it 100 times before. Then he leaned in and kissed her, slow and easy, like they had all the time in the world. I didn't move. I didn't honk or storm out. I just sat there, frozen in place, watching my wife kiss another man outside her fake overnight shift. They got into his car, an old SUV, beat up and dusty, definitely not hers, and drove off. I followed from a distance, my fingers clenched so tight around the steering wheel, I thought the leather would tear. They went to a hotel off the highway, one of those places with a broken sign and weekly rates. I watched them walk inside. She was still wearing her scrubs. He had one hand on the small of her back, guiding her like he owned her. I didn't follow them in, didn't make a scene. I just sat there, staring at the entrance until the sun came up. When I got home, she was already back, hair wet from a shower, robe tied around her waist. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened. Sorry I didn't text last night, she said, pouring herself coffee. I was up to my neck in grant paperwork. I barely got to pee. I watched her lie so easily it made me sick. That day I started paying attention. Her phone suddenly had a password. She never left it on the counter anymore. She'd hum in the shower, some song I didn't recognize, and take longer to get ready for her shifts. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I started taking notes. Times, patterns, license plates. I wasn't just watching her anymore. I was collecting. Every night I lay beside her like a husband, and every morning I logged what she did like a stranger. I was quiet, distant, careful. She didn't notice. She had no idea she'd already lost, because from that moment in the parking lot, I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the man unraveling the lie she built her new life on. The SUV was easy to follow. Kayla never questioned why I suddenly encouraged her to get out more or take time for herself. She thought I was retreating, emotionally withdrawing like some fragile man who couldn't handle stress. Maybe that made her feel justified. Maybe it made her feel safe. It made it easier. I tracked the SUV to a rundown motel just off Route 31. No cameras in the lot, no front desk clerk who cared enough to ask questions. They met there every Thursday like it was their sacred ritual. She always parked around back. He always wore the same faded hoodie, navy blue, with my university's logo stitched across the chest. I recognized it the second I saw him wearing it. It used to be mine. The first time I saw that, something in me stilled. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was clinical, cold, focused, like I was documenting someone else's fall. I rented a room directly across from theirs the following week. Paid in cash under a fake name. Left the TV on to drown out the silence and mounted a small dash camera on the window facing the lot. It was meant for a car, but it worked perfectly. Every time they met, I recorded the footage. She'd climb out of the SUV, adjust her coat, smooth her hair. He'd slap the roof of the car like a caveman and follow her inside. 20 minutes later, the lights would flick on in the same room, always number 212. I didn't watch what happened inside. I didn't need to. I time-stamped everything, labeled the files, built a folder so thorough it would make a private investigator jealous. I kept my notes in a locked drawer at work, along with screenshots of her call logs and social media activity. I even pulled their text messages off a backup she accidentally left open on our home computer. They weren't clever. They used emojis and code names, but it wasn't hard to decode. Spin class meant motel. Gym smoothie meant morning sex. Colin would send her photos of the bed, or worse, mirror selfies in my hoodie, making peace signs like a child. That was when I stopped feeling anything. The final blow came in an envelope. I'd asked Kayla, casually, if she'd be open to a routine paternity panel for the baby, just for peace of mind. She'd rolled her eyes, but agreed, probably assuming I wouldn't go through with it. I did. The results came in a week later. I didn't open the envelope right away. I sat with it on my lap in my car for hours, watching the sun crawl across the dashboard. Then, with a single breath, I tore it open. 0.00%. Probability of paternity. The air went still. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded the paper, slid it into a folder labeled Court, and placed it next to the videos, the screenshots, the records. All of it. I was ready now. Let her talk. let her perform. Because when the curtain dropped, I'd be holding the truth like a scalpel. Kayla came into court like she was walking a runway, chin high, belly out, wearing some soft beige maternity dress that looked expensive. She smiled at people in the gallery, nodded politely to the bailiff, even gave Colin's hand a little squeeze as they took their seats. She thought she was winning, thought she had built the perfect story. The abandoned, glowing mother-to-be, tragically wronged by her cold, checked-out professor ex-husband. And Colin, the loyal friend-turned-fiancé. Her knight in tight slacks and $200 loafers. It was a beautiful picture, I'll give her that. Her attorney opened with a sob story. Dean misrepresented his intentions during the pregnancy, provided no emotional or financial support, refused to participate in doctor visits. The judge listened without much expression, just nodding and writing notes. Then Kayla took the stand again. She looked straight at me as she spoke. "I begged him," she said, her voice soft, broken. "I begged him to be there. I never wanted to do this alone. But Dean didn't care. He didn't want the baby. He said it was too much, that I was ruining his life." A quiet gasp from someone behind me. I didn't turn. Kayla put a hand on her belly and looked down at it, like she was cradling her story. "I tried to make things work. I really did. But he just left." When her attorney rested, the judge looked at me. "Mr. Connolly, do you wish to respond?" I stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I have a folder of documents to submit into evidence." The bailiff took the folder from me. The judge opened it, started flipping through. Her eyebrows lifted. "Are these text messages?" "Yes, Your Honor, between Kayla and Mr. Coleman. Videos of them meeting regularly during our marriage at a motel." Colin sat up straight. Kayla turned to look at him like she just remembered he existed. Her face, whatever shade of pink blush she had used, started to fade into something pale and tense. I didn't stop there. "There's also a paternity test," I said flat. "Taken at Kayla's consent. The results show 0 probability of paternity." The judge looked at Kayla. "Ms. Bennett, did you agree to a paternity test?" Kayla opened her mouth, closed it. Her lawyer whispered something frantic in her ear. She didn't respond. "Ms. Bennett," the judge said again. Finally, Kayla nodded. The courtroom went silent. The kind of silence that settles like dust, slow, heavy, inescapable. "Thank you," the judge said. "We'll break to review." Court adjourned for recess. I was gathering my papers when Kayla caught up to me in the hallway. Her tone had changed. "You didn't have to do that," she snapped. "You didn't have to humiliate me like that." I met her eyes. "You lied under oath," I said. "You used the courts to try and extort a man you knew wasn't the father, and you dragged me into it." Tears welled in her eyes, but I'd seen them before. They didn't move me. "You're not even angry," she whispered, like that was worse than yelling. "You're just cruel." "No," I said, calm as stone. "I'm just done." Colin stormed out a few minutes later and made a beeline toward me in the parking lot. He looked like he wanted a fight. I didn't flinch. "You think you're clever?" he barked. "You think this makes you better than us?" I tilted my head. "She didn't tell you about the other guy, did she?" He blinked. "There's another folder," I said. "If you want it, ask nicely." I left him standing there, didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I let the silence do the damage. It always does. At first, Kayla went quiet. After the hearing, after the truth peeled her story apart like wet paper, she disappeared for a couple days. No posts, no calls, nothing. It was like the oxygen had left her little curated world. Then the counterattack began. She went straight to social media. First came a long, emotional post, some filtered photo of her sitting on a park bench, hand on her stomach, eyes looking somewhere off camera like she was pondering the weight of the universe. When someone you once loved abandons you and your unborn child, the pain is unbearable. But I will rise. I will protect this baby, even if he won't. Overnight, the comments poured in. "You're so strong. He doesn't deserve you. Men like that don't deserve to be fathers." People I barely knew started tagging me in comments, messaging me vague threats, quoting parts of her posts like they had any idea what actually happened. She painted me as a monster. Cold. Calculating. A man who ran the moment she said the word baby. Friends of hers, some mutual, some not, jumped in to share their own memories of me. One guy said I always gave off those control freak vibes. Another claimed he once heard me joke that I wasn't dad material. None of it mattered. It was all fiction. But online, fiction spreads faster than facts. She posted ultrasound photos next. He didn't want to see this, she wrote, but I'll never forget the heartbeat. I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. My silence drove her crazy, I could tell. She started poking at people in my life, messaging colleagues, tagging the university in vague accusations about faculty misconduct and neglect of paternal duties. She stopped just short of using my full name, but anyone who knew me would recognize the breadcrumbs. My department chair called me in one morning, concerned. She knew about the divorce, but the online noise was getting harder to ignore. I showed her the paternity test, the court ruling, the footage, everything. She nodded, lips tight. You don't owe me an explanation, Dean, but you should know this kind of drama sticks, even when it's fake. I understood. I'd taught history long enough to know how revisionism works. Let the lie circulate long enough, and people start believing it. But the truth was waiting. It arrived in a message from a fake account. No name, just an anonymous handle and a link. The video played instantly. It was Kayla, sitting on Colin's lap at the motel, laughing as he filmed her. They were joking about names for the baby, and then Kayla said it. Well, it's definitely not Dean's, so we can cross out any boring professor names. Colin laughed. Still gonna try to get that support though, right? Kayla winked. Obviously. I stared at the screen. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was damning. The video went public 2 days later. I didn't leak it. I didn't need to. But someone did. Maybe Colin, maybe someone else in their little circle, tired of the lies. Either way, it hit the internet like a bomb. The comments flipped fast. People deleted their sympathy messages. Friends quietly untagged themselves. One of Kayla's cousins posted, I feel sick. I defended her. She tried damage control. Posted some quote about cancel culture and edited videos. But it didn't work. You can't put the smoke back in the fire. Kayla's name was Mud. Her story collapsed. Her online army scattered. And me, I stayed quiet. I didn't post a victory lap. I didn't say I told you so. The truth did all the talking. Colin showed up at my office on a Wednesday afternoon. It had been 2 weeks since the video dropped. The university had quietly backed off. The whispers had faded, and Kayla's social media had gone dark. I figured it was over, or as over as things like this ever get. Then I looked up and saw him standing outside the glass door. He didn't knock, just hovered there, holding something small in one hand, looking more like a ghost than the smug fiancé who once strutted into court in a tailored suit. I buzzed him in. He walked in without a word, eyes sunken, face pale like he hadn't slept in days. What do you want? I asked, keeping my voice even. He held out a flash drive, just a plain black one, no label. Just take it, he muttered. I didn't move. What is it? Colin ran a hand through his hair. He looked hollow. It's everything, her emails, messages, stuff she saved in the cloud. I found it when I was trying to delete our shared photo album. She forgot to log out of her drive. I still didn't take it. Why are you giving this to me? He shrugged. Because I was stupid, because I thought I knew her, because I believed her when she said you were the villain, and now I know better. That sounded rehearsed, but the way he said it, empty-on, like he'd already done the mental math and knew he'd lost. I reached out and took the drive. She doesn't know you have this? I asked. Number, and I don't care if she finds out. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. There's a spreadsheet in there, he added. You'll know it when you see it. Then he was gone. I closed the blinds and locked the door, plugged the drive into my laptop. It whirred for a second, then opened a folder named simply Notes. Inside were screenshots, emails, calendar entries, a list of usernames for dating apps she had kept active during our marriage and even while living with Colin. Half the files were unreadable at first because I couldn't stop shaking. Then I found the spreadsheet. It was titled Roster. I opened it. Columns stretched across the screen: name, role, risk level, reliability, backup plan. My name was in row 2. Role, provider. Risk level, low. Reliability, very high. Notes: will believe anything if framed as emotional distress. keeps detailed routines. Do not push too hard at once. She'd categorized me like I was a resource, like a tool. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, bile rising. This wasn't heartbreak. This was strategy. She hadn't just lied. She had mapped me out like a con artist casing a mark. When I got home that night, I called my lawyer, told her to prep documents, defamation, fraud, perjury, emotional damages. She whistled softly on the other end of the line. "You sure about this, Dean?" "Absolutely," I said. "I've been playing defense long enough. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. It was time to go on the offensive." She showed up on a rainy Tuesday. No call, no warning, just a knock on my front door around 9 at night. I knew it was her before I even checked the peephole. I stood there for a moment, letting her wait, letting her soak. When I finally opened the door, Kayla stood on the porch, makeup smeared, hair damp, one arm wrapped protectively around her belly. She held a cheap folder in one hand and a crumpled sonogram photo in the other. "Dean," she said, voice small. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slow, like she was trying to read the air. I noticed she was still wearing the same coat from court. Maybe she thought it would remind me of better days. It didn't. We stood in the living room, neither of us sitting. The rain ticked lightly against the windows, and for a few seconds, I just waited. Finally, she held out the sonogram. "I thought maybe you'd want to see this." I didn't take it. She let her arm drop. "I know things got out of hand," she said, eyes darting around like she didn't know where to look. "Colin turned out to be, he wasn't who I thought. He's gone now." "Good," I said, flat, her face tensed. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I've been thinking about us, about everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Us?" She nodded, stepping closer. "Dean, I was scared. I made mistakes. I got caught up in things I shouldn't have. But I miss you. I miss the way things used to be." She was trying to cry, but it didn't land. I waited. "I think maybe we rushed into things. Maybe we could talk, reconnect. You were always the steady one. You're the only man who ever really knew me." I stared at her, not angry, just done. "You lied under oath," I said. "You used me. You planned it." She blinked. "That's not fair." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't start rewriting this. I have every message, every video, every file." Her mouth opened, but no words came. "You don't want me," I said. "You want shelter, a reset button. You want the man who cleaned up your messes." She stepped back, eyes flashing. "So that's it? You're just going to pretend none of it meant anything?" I shrugged. "It didn't to you." She scoffed, then shoved the folder into my chest. "Fine, then take this. It's medical paperwork. You're probably dying to analyze it like a spreadsheet." I let it fall to the floor. She flinched. "You're ice, Dean," she hissed. "You always were. That's why we fell apart." "No," I said, stepping forward. "We fell apart because you're a liar, and I finally stopped pretending otherwise." Her face contorted. "I'll tell people you hit me." I didn't blink. "Try it. The internet's already seen the truth. Your audience is gone." She looked around one last time, like she thought maybe the house would hold a sliver of sympathy. It didn't. I opened the door. "You can let yourself out," I said. She stood frozen for a second, like she wanted to scream, but she didn't. She walked out without another word, and this time, I didn't just shut the door behind her. I locked it. I never sent the files, never leaked a single video, screenshot, or spreadsheet. But someone did. A week after Kayla stormed out of my house, the roster spreadsheet went viral on a private Reddit thread and bled into a few dark corners of Twitter. Screenshots from the motel camera followed, along with clips from her own cloud account. Her voice laughing clear as day. "It's not Dean's, obviously. But support is support." Within 48 hours, Kayla's curated world crumbled. The hospital placed her on administrative leave pending an internal ethics review. She had apparently used work resources, email, scheduling software, even a company tablet, to coordinate some of her motel meetups. Smart move. Her friends, especially the ones who'd rushed to comment on her strength and glow a few weeks earlier, vanished. A few posted vague backpedaling stories about not knowing the full truth and needing to prioritize mental health. Even her sister unfollowed her. Her parents? I didn't hear much, but word got around they were deeply disappointed. I imagine that's code for mortified. But the real blow came from her job. She didn't just lose it, she lost her license. The board investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Between the personal conduct, patient privacy risks, and forged time logs, Kayla was done. Publicly, officially. She tried to post an apology video. Some poorly lit kitchen confessional where she blamed stress, isolation, and falling into the wrong arms. It got 10,000 views and 20,000 comments. Most of them weren't kind. She shut her socials down the next morning. Colin disappeared too. No more check-ins, no public defense. Maybe he left town. Maybe he finally read the spreadsheet and saw his own name next to the note. Passion equals high, trust equals low. Long-term, probably not. I watched it all unfold quietly. No satisfaction, no gloating, just distance. It was strange how fast the noise faded, how quickly the messages stopped. No more vague threats, no more fake tears, just silence. I used it. I started therapy. Real therapy. Not just the tenured academic kind where you talk about stress and drink black coffee. I told the truth, sat in a room and admitted I'd spent years mistaking control for loyalty. That I'd confused being needed with being loved. I started running again. Mornings before work, just me in the fog. I threw out the hoodie she left behind, the university one Colin used to wear. I deleted the videos, burned the hard copies, let it all go. People kept asking me if I'd sue her, if I'd press charges, if I'd try to claw back the damage. But I didn't need to. The lie collapsed under its own weight, and I didn't lift a finger. For the first time in years, I wasn't fixing anyone. I was just living. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Just my name, printed neatly in the center. I almost threw it out. But something about it, maybe the weight, maybe the quiet finality of the way it just appeared in my mailbox, made me take it inside. I opened it at the kitchen counter, where I'd once stood pouring Kayla coffee and pretending things were fine. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. No greeting, no sign-off. Just her handwriting, slanted, sharp. The baby isn't yours, or Colin's. I thought I could convince myself it didn't matter, that love or commitment or some performance of stability could erase that fact. But truth has a way of ruining things. You were the only one who ever saw through me, and still stayed. That's on you, I guess. I lied, about a lot. You already knew that. But I wanted to say it plain once, without games, without pleading. The baby isn't yours, and I'm not who you thought I was. I never was. That was it. No apology, no regret. No, I'm sorry for what I did to you. Just a confession, clean and hollow. I stood there for a long time, holding that page like it weighed more than it should. Then I folded it up, walked to the bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one where I'd quietly been keeping a small stack of emotional leftovers. The paternity test, a motel receipt I'd never shown anyone, a printed screenshot of spreadsheet Colin gave me. I slipped the letter inside, shut the drawer, and didn't look back. There was a time when that note would have shattered me, when her words, even a sentence, had power, when I would have read between every line, looking for some scrap of the woman I thought I married. But that version of me was long gone. I didn't need her truth to validate mine. She wrote the letter because she had to, not because it changed anything. It didn't. It was just another broken piece in a long trail of shattered glass. And I had finally learned to walk barefoot without bleeding. I never read it again. It started with a used bookstore, not some slick chain with coffee counters and playlists, but one of those narrow, dusty places with handwritten signs and creaky floorboards. I'd wandered in on a rainy afternoon, just looking to kill time. I ended up in the philosophy section, flipping through a worn copy of The Myth of Sisyphus, of all things. That's when I met Natalie. She was standing 2 rows over, arguing with herself about whether she needed another copy of The Bell Jar. She had paint on her hands and a messy ponytail, and didn't even look up when she asked, "Would it be insane to buy the same book for the 3rd time, just because I like the margin notes?" I smiled before I could stop myself. "Only if it's in hardcover," I said. She turned, looked at me, smiled back. That was the beginning. We went for coffee the next day. She didn't Google me, didn't ask about my job until the 3rd date. When I told her I taught history, she just nodded and said, "Ah, so you're good at remembering terrible things." She asked questions that weren't small talk. She talked about her sister, who had cancer, and the years she spent thinking grief made her stronger, but it didn't. She said she'd rather be lonely than dishonest, and she wasn't interested in saving people. I believed her. We took it slow. There were no grand declarations, no fireworks, just something solid, kind, quiet. One night, a few months in, I drove up to a spot I hadn't visited in years, an overlook just outside the city, where Kayla and I used to sit before things got messy. I parked the car and got out, a box in my hand. Inside was my old wedding ring. It felt heavier than I remembered. I held it for a minute, let the cold metal press against my palm. Then I walked to the edge and threw it out into the darkness. No speech, no dramatic gesture, just a simple goodbye. I stood there until I couldn't see the ring anymore, until all that was left was wind and silence. Then I breathed, a full breath, one that didn't feel forced or painful, one that didn't belong to the man I used to be. When I got back in the car, I checked my phone. A message from Natalie. Still down for tacos? Or should I find someone else to argue with about which tortilla is correct? I smiled. Not because I was starting over, not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't stuck anymore. I wasn't tethered to a lie, or to the version of myself who thought love meant sacrifice, who thought loyalty meant staying silent. This was new, not perfect, not flashy, but real, and for the first time, that was enough.